Robert Hale lived a life built on quiet routines. Every morning at exactly 5:45, he woke without an alarm, brewed a cup of black coffee, and sat by the window of his small apartment overlooking the dim streets of Boston's South End. His face was unreadable, neither peace nor sadness, just the calm of a man who had seen everything and decided to feel nothing. By 6:30, he would be out the door, dressed in a neat gray jacket and worn leather shoes, walking toward the hardware store where he worked. To the world he was Mr. Hale, the polite, punctual employee who fixed what was broken, who smiled faintly at customers but never stayed for small talk. No one knew about his past, that he had once been someone else entirely. At night, when the city's noise faded, Hale would go to a small 24-hour diner near the river. He always sat at the same booth, ordered the same tea, and read through his old paperback novels. Mostly classics, mostly about redemption. The waitress, a young girl named Alina, had noticed him months ago. She was 17, maybe 18, working long nights to pay off debts that weren't hers. She liked that he listened, that he didn't look at her the way other men did. Hale noticed everything. The bruises she tried to hide, the tiredness in her eyes, the expensive car that sometimes dropped her off after hours. One night, she sat across from him while her shift ended, twirling a spoon in her coffee. "You ever think some people don't get a choice?" she asked. Hale looked at her, his expression unchanged. "Everyone gets a choice," he said softly. "Sometimes it just costs more than we're willing to pay." She smiled sadly. "You sound like you've paid a lot." He didn't answer. The next night, she didn't come to work. Instead, two men in leather jackets walked in, Russian by the accent, by the tattoos. They talked loudly to the manager, left money on the counter like it was an insult, and laughed on their way out. Hale's eyes followed them. He didn't know why. Or maybe he did. The night after that, Alina came back, limping, her lips split. She told the cook she fell. She told Hale nothing. But when she turned to leave, he saw a small cut on her wrist, fresh and red, shaped like a ring mark. Someone's hand had been there too long. Later that night, Hale followed the black car she got into. He stayed back, quiet, patient. The car stopped at an upscale club with neon lights and Russian music spilling into the street. Two bouncers guarded the entrance. She went inside. He waited, watched. When she came out, she wasn't alone. A man in a suit, mid-40s, gold chain, cold eyes, walked beside her. He spoke to her like she was property. Hale saw her flinch when the man grabbed her arm. He said something in Russian, and she nodded quickly. That was the moment something inside Hale, something buried deep for years, began to wake up. He went home and sat by his window. His old hands trembled slightly as he reached for the drawer under his table. Inside was a silver watch, scratched and military-issued, stopped at 11:59. Next to it was a photograph, a younger version of him in uniform, standing beside men who looked dangerous and proud. The kind of men who didn't exist anymore. He stared at the photo, then at the watch. And when he wound it, the second hand ticked again, slow, certain, alive. The next evening, Hale returned to the diner. Alina wasn't there. The waitress said she had been taken for work, some private event. That was all he needed to hear. He left a few bills on the table, stepped into the cold night, and walked toward the club. As he approached, the same two Russian guards stood outside smoking. He studied their movements, who looked away, who had a weapon bulge, how the door opened and closed. He could tell from 50 feet away how many people were inside, how fast he could move, how long it would take before the sirens came. He wasn't thinking like Robert Hale anymore. He was thinking like the man he used to be. He checked his watch. The 59. When the second hand struck 12, he walked forward. The first guard barely saw him coming. A quick motion. The man's wrist snapped, the gun fell, a punch to the throat silenced the shout. The second turned, reaching for his weapon. But Hale slammed him against the wall and twisted his arm until it broke. Quiet, efficient, done. He walked inside, through the red lights and the heavy bass like a shadow moving through smoke. He wasn't angry, not yet. This was calculation, precision. And somewhere in the back room he heard her voice. "Please." "I'll work double," Alina begged. A man's laughter followed, low, cruel, confident. Hale closed his eyes for half a second. Then he opened them, cold and clear. It was time for the past to return. The door to the back room swung open with a slow creak. Inside, the air smelled of perfume, sweat, and fear. 3 men were standing around a velvet couch. Alina sat there shaking, her makeup streaked, her eyes empty. The man in the gold chain, the one who had spoken to her outside, was pouring vodka into a glass, his laughter low and venomous. He looked up when Hale entered. "Who the hell are you?" he asked in a thick accent. Hale didn't answer. He closed the door behind him. The man smiled. "You lost, old man." He gestured toward the guards. "Get him out." The first guard stepped forward, large and confident. Hale's eyes scanned the room. 3 exits, 2 armed men, 1 bottle within reach. Timing was everything. The guard swung a punch. Hale shifted, letting it pass inches from his face, and countered with a strike so precise it crushed the man's windpipe. The second guard drew his pistol, but Hale had already grabbed the vodka bottle. He smashed it against the man's head, glass scattering like rain. The room went silent except for the heavy thud of a body hitting the floor. The man in the gold chain had stopped smiling. "Who are you?" he asked again, his voice shaking now. Hale walked closer, his boots crunching on glass. "I'm someone who made a promise," he said quietly. He looked at Alina. "Go." She hesitated. He won't," Hale interrupted. She ran. The man reached for a drawer, but Hale was faster. He pinned him against the wall, his forearm pressing into his throat. "You hurt her," Hale said calmly, like reading a fact from a book. "You sell girls. You think nobody sees. But I see you. I see all of you," the man gasped, clawing at Hale's arm. You don't know who you're messing with," he choked. "The Vasiliev family owns this city." Hale's voice didn't change. "Then I'll start with them." He twisted the man's neck. The sound was quiet, almost polite, and then there was nothing. By the time Hale walked out of the club, the streets were still wet from rain. He pulled his hood up and vanished into the dark. The next morning, the news was already spreading. A Russian mobster found dead in his club. No witnesses, no footage, no trace. The police called it a targeted hit. The Russians called it an insult, and in their world, insults were repaid in blood. Hale knew that. He spent the day like any other, working quietly at the hardware store, stacking boxes, fixing shelves. But his eyes were alert, scanning every car that passed the glass windows. At noon, a black SUV parked across the street. 2 men inside, watching. He'd expected that too. When his shift ended, he took the long route home, through narrow alleys, side streets, construction zones. He wanted them to follow. They did. At a deserted intersection, he stopped walking. The SUV slowed behind him. Hale turned. The passenger window rolled down. A man with a shaved head leaned out, smirking. "Mr. Hale?" he said. "Or should I say, whatever your real name is." Hale said nothing. "My boss wants to talk." The man continued. "You killed someone important." "I did," Hale replied. "He deserved worse," the man laughed. "You think this is a movie, old man? You think you're some kind of hero?" "No," Hale said. "I think I'm the consequence." He moved before the man could blink. His hand reached inside his jacket, not for a gun, but for a small wrench from his pocket. In one swift motion, he hurled it through the open window. It struck the driver's temple with brutal precision. The SUV swerved, smashed into a lamppost, and stopped. Hale walked up calmly, pulled open the door, and dragged the second man out. "Tell your boss," he said, pressing the man's head against the cold pavement. "I'm coming for him. For all of you." Then he left him breathing, barely. That night, Hale sat in his apartment surrounded by silence. He'd taken out the photograph again, staring at the faces, men from his past. The agency had called them cleaners, the kind of operatives who didn't exist in official records. He'd left that life years ago after too many bodies, too many lies. He thought he'd buried it all, but evil had a way of digging things up. His phone buzzed. A message. Unknown number. "You're a dead man, Hale." V. He stared at it, expressionless, then deleted it. At the same time, across the city, the Vasiliev brothers sat around a marble table in their mansion. Dmitri, the younger one, was furious, pacing, shouting in Russian. Victor, the elder, was quiet, sipping whiskey. He killed Oleg in his own club. Dmitri shouted, "You want to do nothing?" Victor set his glass down. We'll do something. But not angry. Angry men make mistakes. He turned to his lieutenant. Find the girl. She's the key. Find the old man's weakness. Everyone has one. 2 days later, Hale found his apartment door slightly open. He entered slowly. The air was wrong. The table was overturned, the books scattered, the photograph gone. And on the wall, written in red marker, was a message. You can't protect her. His jaw tightened. He closed the door, locked it, and walked to the kitchen. From under the sink, he pulled out a small steel box, heavy, old, sealed with a code. He entered the numbers like muscle memory. Inside were tools of a life he thought he'd left behind, a suppressed pistol, a combat knife, and the silver watch. He strapped the watch to his wrist. The ticking felt louder now, steady, ruthless. He looked into the mirror. The quiet man from the hardware store was gone. The equalizer was back. That night, the Russians came for him. 3 cars. 6 men. Silent, professional, armed. They broke in through the side door and walked into hell. Hale was waiting in the dark. He moved like smoke 1 step ahead, each motion a calculation. The first man fell before he saw the shadow. The second's gun misfired. Hale had cut the circuit breaker, leaving them blind. The room became a war zone of muffled screams and metal clicks. When the last man fell, Hale checked his watch. 1 minute, 47 seconds. He exhaled. Calm again. Then he heard a faint noise, a phone buzzing in one of the dead men's pockets. He picked it up. The screen showed a message. Bring the girl to the docks. Midnight. Hale's reflection appeared in the cracked screen. His eyes were no longer kind. He pocketed the phone and whispered, Midnight it is. The docks at midnight were a graveyard of steel and silence. Fog rolled across the black water, muffling the hum of the city in the distance. Rusted cranes loomed like skeletons, and the air smelled of salt and oil. Robert Hale stood at the edge of Pier 17, watching the shadows move among the shipping containers. He'd come early as always. Patience was his first weapon. He'd scouted the ground, counted the men, traced the lights, memorized every path to the exit. There were 12 of them, and somewhere among them, Alina. He checked his watch. Pier 57, from the dark, headlights appeared, 3 SUVs, gliding like predators. The doors opened. Men stepped out, armed and confident. They surrounded the central figure, Viktor Vassiliev. He was tall, calm, and expensively dressed, with eyes that had forgotten what mercy looked like. So you're the man who's been causing me trouble, Viktor said. His voice was smooth, almost polite. Hale didn't reply. His silence unnerved Viktor more than any threat could have. You killed my brother, Viktor continued. You ruined my business. You think because you saved 1 girl you're some kind of savior? You think this changes anything? Hale spoke quietly. It changes her life. Viktor's smirk disappeared. He nodded toward his men. 2 of them dragged Alina out from the SUV, wrists tied, eyes terrified. She's the reason you're dying tonight, Viktor said. I'll let her watch. Hale's voice was calm. She's seen enough. He pressed the button on his watch. The second hand began ticking, and time slowed to purpose. At that moment, the lights on the dock flickered, then went black. Panic rippled through the Russians. Hale moved, silent, precise. A ghost among metal, the first man, didn't even feel the knife that slid between his ribs. The second saw a shadow, raised his gun, and the wrench Hale threw shattered his wrist before he could fire. He screamed. The sound was swallowed by the wind. Gunfire erupted, wild, untrained, desperate. Bullets sparked off steel containers, echoing through the dark like thunder. Hale weaved between them, using every sound, every reflection. When one man reloaded, Hale was behind him. When another turned, his throat was already cut. The Russians began shouting orders in panic. He's one man. Find him! But Hale wasn't one man anymore. He was training. He was consequence. He was everything they'd ever done wrong, coming back to collect. Within 3 minutes, the dock was a graveyard. Only Viktor remained. He stumbled backward, pistol shaking, breath fogging in the cold. He turned toward the SUV, but Alina was gone. Then he saw her, standing by the car, hands free. She was holding the knife Hale had slipped into her bonds when he first approached. Her face was pale, but her eyes burned with something new. Strength. Run, Hale said gently from the shadows. She didn't move. Victor spun toward the sound, firing blindly. The gun clicked empty. Hale stepped out from behind the container, walking slowly, each step deliberate. "You think killing us will change the world?" Victor snarled. "There will always be men like me." Hale's voice was calm, cold as the sea. "Then I'll always be here." Victor lunged, swinging the pistol like a club. Hale caught his arm, twisted it, and drove his fist into Victor's gut, once, twice, controlled, brutal. The man fell to his knees, coughing blood. "You took people who couldn't fight back," Hale said quietly. "You built your power on fear. That ends tonight." Victor spat blood. "You can't kill me." "You're not that man anymore." Hale paused, then smiled faintly, the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Maybe not, but he still lives in me." The watch ticked to 0. The explosion came from the SUVs, small, precise, enough to light the night sky. Flames reflected off the water like shards of fire. Victor turned to look, just in time for Hale's blade to find his heart. Silence returned. Hale knelt beside him, closed his eyes and whispered, "Justice." The next morning, the newspapers called it a gang massacre. No witnesses, no suspects, just fire and death at the docks. Alina sat in the diner, hands wrapped around a cup of coffee. She looked up as the bell above the door rang, but it wasn't him. She somehow knew it wouldn't be. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded napkin. Inside it were a few bills and a note written in neat handwriting. "You get to start over." "Don't waste it!" Tears welled in her eyes. She smiled through them. Far from the city, in a quiet coastal town, a man named Robert Hale rented a small house near the sea. He fixed broken boats, repaired engines, and lived simply. No one knew where he came from. No one asked. Sometimes at dawn he'd sit by the water, reading his old paperbacks, the same kind Alina used to see him with. He'd sip coffee and watch the sunrise, its reflection soft against the waves. He'd almost convinced himself it was peace. Until one morning, a stranger appeared, a tall man in a dark coat, holding a file. "Mr. Hale," the man said. "You don't know me, but my agency does." "You made quite a mess in Boston." Hale didn't look up. "Clean it up then," the man smiled. "You're wasted here." "We could use someone like you again." Hale turned a page in his book. "Not interested." The man set the file on the table. Inside were photos. Children trafficked, women missing, familiar faces of monsters who thought they were untouchable. Hale closed the book. The man nodded. "Same kind of men, different city." For a long time, Hale said nothing. Then he stood, slowly, the ocean wind lifting the edge of his coat. "Where?" he asked. The man handed him a card. "New York." Hale slipped it into his pocket. "Give me a day." As the man walked away, Hale looked out at the horizon. The world was quiet again, but not clean. He checked his watch. The second hand was still ticking. Steady, patient, eternal, he whispered to himself. Some things don't end. They just wait. Then he picked up his jacket and walked toward the rising sun.